We are almost ready to begin our program, so make sure you have your teacups filled. You have a sweet on your plate, and we'll begin shortly. This might also be a good time to take one stroll past the auction table again, if anybody's interested in doing that. But please, you are welcome during the program. You are welcome to continue to drink tea and to enjoy the sweets. It is my pleasure to introduce to you the speaker for our program this afternoon. Kim Parr was here last year and gave the program on Fanny Farmer, which so many of you enjoyed, and at that time said to me, "Is there anything else that she does? Can she come back again?" And so I said, "I think I know just the program." So this is Kim Parr. Kim is the director of the Crocker Museum in Mount Clemens. She's been director there for 13 and a half years, and she knows what she's doing. So would you please welcome Kim Parr, and she will give our program.
Thanks so much for wanting to hear me speak again. I think you're going to have fun today, because who couldn't have fun talking about underwear? Right? But I want to thank all of you. It seems to me like this is bigger than last year, and that just goes to show you how much the word is getting out that you need to support your local historical society and all the rich history that you have here in Richmond. So kudos to you for doing that. That's really generous of you, and I think you're having a good time, aren't you? Good. This is a beautiful tea. Well, yeah, I've been director at the Crocker House Museum for 13 and a half years now, and before that, I was an on-site coordinator of living history at Greenfield Village. So I did multiple eras and wore the clothing from multiple eras, and reading the audience of people that come to Greenfield Village, they were always interested in your clothing. And then, of course, to wear the clothing properly, you had to wear the proper undergarments for it to look the way that it really would have looked in that era. And so I'd have the question all the time, "Do you really have a corset on under there?" And I'd be like, "Go ahead, punch me." Full of steel. Nothing can get through here. So when I had left Greenfield Village and started working at the Crocker House Museum in Mount Clemens, I had a lot to learn about Mount Clemens history because I'm a Detroiter. I grew up in Detroit, and so Mount Clemens to me was so far away, and like Richmond was super far away. So when I went into the museum, I had, number one job was trying to get the collections in order, and I was like, oh my gosh, this museum has an awesome clothing collection and undergarments too. So I created a display, corsets and all kinds of, drawers and things like that, undergarments. And some of the initial board members were mad at me. I'm brand new, Here I'm making enemies because I'm doing a display on undergarments. But that was their mentality. But then I got the local newspaper to do an article, and then we got people to come in, and they're like, well, I guess that's not such a bad idea. Because, it is interesting. And then the Questers, who does a pottery lunch kind of similar to this. Anyone go to that? The Montebisi Quester pottery lunch. It's awesome. Oh, there we go. Paulette. Hey, she's one of the ladies in charge of that. It's April 9th. So talk to her if you want tickets. But they asked me, can you do a program for our Quester pottery lunch? And I thought, well, I'll create one to go along with the exhibit that we're doing. And so I created it, and little did I know there'd be so much interest in it, and here I am, 13 years later, still giving it. So it's kind of expanded and stuff, and I started collecting some stuff on my own. So what I'm going to do is take you from the Middle Ages to World War I, because this is where we see, after World War I is really what changed, and now we're more in relaxed clothing. So be thankful, right? But when you think of, a lot of people are doing genealogical research. When I'm talking today about these undergarments, think about your ancestors, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and, now you can kind of think about what their daily routine was, how they had to deal with life wearing what they had, which was more restricting than what we're used to. So while we're going through those eras, I'm going to do a dressing. So can someone give me a drum roll? Okay. Wow, I'm showing a lot, aren't I? Just look, yeah, I'm showing my shoulders. Yes. So this is a chemise, and I'll get down to that. In fact, this is my official Vanna White, and she's going to do my slides for me. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to show you where the arrow keys are. You got it. Okay, there we go. The chemise. Actually, the initial word for this garment was called a shift. That's by English-speaking people. And for some reason, by the late 1700s, 1790s, this became a vulgar term, kind of like the word gay used to mean happy, and now it means something else. So what we saw, or what we see through history with undergarments, is that the French, because they were leaders in the undergarment industry, particularly corsets, we start to see the words, French words being used. So chemise does sound prettier than shift, doesn't it? So that became the preferred terms. And over time, your chemise would change, and of course it would be a little bit different on what you're dressing for. Are you dressing for the evening? Then you need what I have on, because you're going to show a little more of your chest. So you'd have something coming off your shoulders. Or for like everyday, for an everyday dress, you'd wear something a little more up on the shoulders like you see here. If I was doing 1700s era, the material would have been more like linen, and in the winter it could be a linsey woolsey mixed with a linen and wool. But when cotton became highly produced, this was much more preferred because it's so much more comfortable. So what I have on is cotton, this is cotton. This would be more for the late 1800s that I have on here. This would be 1860s, the one that I have on here, of course reproduction. The one in my hand is an antique. This is one I wore a lot. Here, and it's just kind of interesting how they made things with the armpits. Like a different little piece of fabric was sewn in there, so it's kind of interesting to also look at how they sewn these things together. And what about nightgowns? See, if I'm interpreting 1700s, this is my nightgown. It's also my base garment. I'm not going to have as many pieces of underclothing. But when we see mass production, things are much more affordable, and you can even buy things out of your Sears and Roebuck catalog, nightgowns and chemises and stuff. I was speaking in Elma, and an older lady said it belonged to her grandmother, and she gave it to me. It was really sweet. But this is from the late 1800s. And that would be, now that's a nightgown. And it's definitely a little thicker, because you don't want your chemise to be as thick because you're layering on top of it. So that was the good thing about nightgowns. You could wear something a little bit thicker. But this kind of looks like a nightgown, but this would be something for winter. And flannel became a preferred material to use for the winter. So you'd have petticoats made out of flannel, your chemise made out of flannel. Okay, let's go to the next slide. You see the word up there, bell brigands? That became, again, this play on words. We call them stockings today, but balbriggans became a term kind of used like Kleenex. It's a tissue, even though it's not made by Kleenex, we often call them Kleenex. Balbriggans were made in Balbriggan, Ireland, and they had the finest, that you could purchase. And so they just kind of use this term loosely. So historically, if you read old journals or whatever, and you hear the word balbriggans, now you know what they are. I'm wearing my balbriggans. Those are the stockings. So I love this. This is from Sears and Roebuck. And it shows the different types of stocking supports that you can wear. You can put a belt on with clips to hold them up. You can put a clip on the bottom of your corset, but of course, where is my corset over here? This was my first corset that I wore at Firestone Farm, Greenfield Village, and I ordered it. There's a company in England that still makes an 1890 corset. It took a while to order it. We did a big order for a bunch of us at the farm. And I decided to order mine with them on it. I never wore them. I felt like a tin soldier wearing them. Because you clip them to your hose and you feel like you're walking like this. And then good luck when you sit down. Oh, it's so uncomfortable. So I personally don't like it, but as with everyone, everyone's different. What feels comfortable to you isn't comfortable to me. So some people wore them. I personally wouldn't do that. I would go to something like this. So I have, believe it or not, rubber was common in shoes and other materials. So you could buy, by this time, this had a rubber material in it. And I love this one with the coin purse. Isn't that great? Let me get my coin. So the original stockings, this is what I would wear at Daggett Farm, 1750s. And the problem here is they really like to droop because they stretch out. And they would have, in the 1700s, simply used a ribbon to hold up their hose because you didn't have anything with rubber in it yet. And then you could buy, this is all late 1700s, you could buy fancy striped socks. And then clockwork stitchery. This is if a part of your ankle would show. I wear these so they're, but I don't know if you can make it out, but there's some real pretty detail at the ankle, and they call that clockwork stitchery. And just in case a part of your ankle would show, at least you'd have something pretty on your hose to show them. These are silk, and silk is very, very comfortable. These are very comfortable to wear. These are my favorites to wear. But the true balbriggans, when they came out, this is what they look like. And believe it or not, you can still buy these. I have to buy these from Gones Brothers in Shipshewana. Actually, a little town just outside of Shipshewana. It's Middlebury. Middlebury. Are you familiar with Gones Brothers? Yeah? Oh, you do? You can find them there if you want to buy them. And what they have is, what they used was a wooden stamp to put the name of the company up on the top of the stocking. And this is really very much what the original balbriggans look like. And then, if you noticed, all of the stockings I've brought up are not black. That's because we didn't come up with a dye that was color fast until 1900. So black was a very hard color to achieve without using an arsenic. Yeah, real healthy for you. And of course, if you step in a puddle, the black would come off on your feet. So you would not have black stockings pre-1900, typically. But once they came out with the sanitary dye, as they called it, then they came up with the black stockings. And probably 9 out of 10 of your stockings would be this because, they didn't show the dirt. So, but that's how long it took them to get a good color-fast black dye. And if we talked about, I teach mourning and funeral customs, and we talked about the veil and the arsenic and the dye, it caused a lot of problems. Eye irritation, lung and throat irritations. And I found in 1886, what book, it wasn't Peterson, it was Harper's Bazaar article. And it talked about this issue. They were aware that the arsenic was making women sick with the veil. But the veil was so prominent of a thing that you had to do to show your grief that they didn't tell them to get rid of the veil. They said, just pin a piece of muslin fabric around your nose and mouth area in the veil to help you. Can you believe that? So, all right, so we have our chemise. We have our balbriggans. What do you think comes next? What's that? Not quite yet. Not the petticoat quite yet. One other thing. Not the corset quite yet. What? Panties. That would be a modern term, but yes. We'll talk about bloomers. That's even another thing. This would be your next garment, drawers. Let's go to the next page. Oh, I forgot to show these. Isn't this the cutest thing? Look at these stocking sport for a little kid. Isn't that adorable? Yeah. Here we go. Here's drawers. Okay, ladies, what's the split for? Yes. Did any of you ever see the movie Mrs. Brown about Queen Victoria? Some of you are shaking your heads. If you haven't, I highly recommend you rent it on Netflix or at the library or whatever. There's a scene where Queen Victoria is walking through the woods with her ladies in waiting, and she's just on in the woods. And they're walking, and then all of a sudden she does this. What do you think she's doing? And how do you think she's doing it? She's got all these clothes on. This is the only way she could be doing it that way. She'd have to have split drawers on. Okay, see, your corset goes over this. You couldn't wear modern panties. Like when I wear a corset, I wear no underwear, ladies. Feels very strange the first time you do it. You feel kind of naughty. Like, this doesn't feel right. But if you want to use the bathroom, otherwise you can't be in a hurry to get everything off. So you really got to wear it the way they wore it. So yeah, your drawers were split. The interesting thing about drawers is that these in the name is what they called men's pants. So they were considered a man's garment. Have you heard of panelettes? Pantaloons? Pantaloons are the same thing. Just depends how you want to say it. What's the difference? These are panelettes. Let me hold them up to me. Much longer. They're intended to be seen. They're still split. They're intended to be seen at the ankle. Now, it became a schoolgirl fashion. And maybe you've seen some old color plates of pictures, or maybe in Civil War era movies where the little girls have the pantalettes showing under their skirts. But originally, guess who made this a fashion statement? I find it very interesting. Queen Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent. Queen Victoria was a strong woman, and where did she get it from? Her mother. Her mother was a strong woman. You had to be very bold to be especially one of the first people to make this a fashion, because do you know what she was saying by showing drawers? She was saying, I can wear the pants. Equal rights. That's what that was. That was a statement. So she had to have been a pretty tough woman and bold. The Parisian women took it on as a style. But then, later it just mainly stuck with the school kids. So now you know the difference between drawers and panelettes. I have to read you something. It's kind of interesting. The first historical document found about drawers, it actually goes back earlier than you'd think, 1605 to 17, in this man's journal. His name was Fynes Morrison. He traveled through Italy. This is where they were first seen, in Italy. He wrote, "The city virgins, and especially gentle women, in many places wear silk or linen breeches under their gowns." First of all, how did he know that? So that is the first historical document of drawers. So it took quite a while, actually, for it to spread over to England and through the continent. So here you see, these are actually red flannel. Red flannel became very popular, too, for the winter. So I have some other examples of drawers, but I want to show you these. How are you going to go to the bathroom with these on? You said it. You pull it to the side. Let me set this down so you can see. You have to bring it over that way, I guess. You'd have to be dexterous to do this. I would probably say someone younger like you would be wearing them, not me. Someone who cared about having pretty undergarments. Personally, I'll take the split drawers. Make it easier. So, what do we have for our next slide there? Okay, so as time went by, we're entering into, 1918, that's the end of World War I. What happened during World War I? All the women are working. They're working the front. Their men are at the front and they're driving vehicles for the first time and doing things that we wouldn't have imagined in earlier times. So what they started to do is some people called these onesies. Let's go to the next page. Yeah, this one I was lucky enough to find in Ohio in an antique store, the very same garment she's wearing, 1917. Let me put this down. And it has the tag Carter's. It has the tag. I love this picture because the whole family's wearing them. And you see how hers are buttoned up here. So it's like a flap for hers. But very comfortable, very warm for the winter. If you're a farm girl, you would appreciate something like this. It's less bulk, than having drawers and a chemise. And it's all cotton, so it's very comfortable. And, of course, keep you warm. So you could probably even sleep in this, too. So, and what they did is they came up with this I found very interesting. I forget where I was speaking, and this woman gave this to me because she didn't have any daughters and nobody that wanted it in her family. And she gave me this onesie. And what I didn't know, sometimes you can't find everything documented in books. Sometimes you just learn things by finding things. This, on the top, thank goodness they didn't cut this panel out. You were supposed to, you bought this fabric on a bolt. It was already in a pattern. And it says here, I need my reading glasses. It says here, number 36 combination, so they also called these a combination. And this says size 38 left, and the other size says right. And it would be sewn in the middle, so you just measure it to your body, where you know where to cut it off, and sew it together. So I thought, oh my gosh, you bought that on a bolt like that, on a and they just cut it, and isn't that clever? And then there's some things, like I said, you discover just by finds. There's a lot of creative people here. You can see we have handmade rugs and crocheted items and doll clothes. Sometimes people just use their own imagination when they make things. I've never found this documented in a book, but here we have it. At the bottom, you put your legs through, and then you fold up the center and button it up underneath there. You see? Looks like a diaper. I had never seen that document. Personally, I don't think I'd want to take the time to unbutton that if I have to go to the bathroom, but this is kind of a chemise combination in a way. I mean, I don't think anybody would wear drawers with this because it's buttoned at the bottom. So, an interesting handmade garment. There we go. Okay, so this is where I'm going to put my drawers on. I have to put my mic down, I'm sorry, and I have to sit down so that I don't moon anybody. I did that the first time I did this program. Were you surprised I tucked it in? Yeah, because my corset will go over this, and then you can take, your chemise to kind of cover those private areas. So that's how you wore it. Real flattering, isn't it? Like I could put a clown wig on and a nose. I got my striped socks. I could be a clown. So there's our drawers, and the button goes in front. So you don't have to reach in the back. So it makes it a little easier. Let's go to the next slide. Some people are curious about, what do? It's that time of the month, you have split drawers. What are you going to do? This is Sears and Roebuck. So this is interesting. They call this a ladies' safety belt because there's a safety pin. So you can attach your serviette or your sanitary napkin. You could pin it, or they had a different kind of belt with the straps that had loops. Now, believe it or not, I don't know if it's still open. I have to research it, but there was a man in New York City who had a menstrual museum. And he has stuff on display going back to the Egyptians, who the Egyptians actually had tampons. Did you know that? Cotton that they put up there. Yeah. That's how far back tampons go. Who would have guessed? But he had actual patterns. And sometimes Harper's Bazaar, Peterson's would publish a pattern for a serviette. You fold it a certain way and sew it a certain way, and they're made out of flannel. And guess what I found online? Flannel pads. Anybody here want to say that they use them? Nobody here uses these? Or had used them? Flannel, and now we have some new material. I have not used this one, but I have some that I have used. Because, I'm a historian. I got to know what it's like, what our ancestors did. And guess what? They don't bunch up. They're dry as a bone. You wash them out, they're dry the next day. So you have this image of your head saying, oh my God, I couldn't have lived back then because they didn't have the sticky ones that you throw away. Guess what? It's not that bad. It really isn't. So it kind of makes you think of their lives a little bit, wasn't that bad. Wasn't as bad as you think. So if you want to buy these online, it's a woman in Ontario that makes them and sells them under the name of Sweet Cheeks. There's let's embarrass the boys here. There you go, suspensory belt. This is for pregnant women. We're going to talk about corsets. They did have corsets for pregnant women. They had gussets here and here, here and here, that could be loosened as you grew. But it got to a point where I can't wear this thing anymore. But the thought of having some support was big. They felt like they needed support. And remember, you could buy things with rubber in them. This has rubber in that. So that's for your last stage of pregnancy that you'd wear that type of a garment. If you didn't have enough on top, no problem, you can buy some pads. And this would it's a shoulder brace. So for someone who has a problem with posture or back problems, to kind of help them stand up more straight. I'm sure it was real comfortable. All right, let's go to the next slide. Guess what? Historians, when they found this is from the Middle Ages, this is made out of cast iron. And historians were first kind of confused. They're like, well, was this really the first corset? But they've determined that it actually was for people with probably back injuries. The points down here are if you were to bend over, so it kind of forced you to stay up. It was laced with a leather strap in the back. But historians believe that the corset was designed off of this thing that you see here. Okay, let's go to the next one. In the 1700s, first of all, we didn't hear the word corset until sometime in the mid-1800s. Prior to the mid-1800s, it was called a waist, and it ended at your waist. Depending on where you lived, you've all heard of whalebone being used, right? But not everybody had access to whalebone. So some people just used wood, green wood. It's still green and it's bendable. The thing is, the pieces of wood, or the whalebone, were called stays. And later on, I'll pull out a stay here. The corset I'm going to be putting on was made with steel. This was great because these don't break. The only problem is sometimes your corset, it'll actually wear out your material before it wears this out. But in earlier times, you'd have to replace these stays quite often because they'd break. Bone breaks, wood will eventually go from green to dry and break. So you were constantly cutting it open, replacing stays in your corset. So when the steel came out, this was fabulous. You didn't have to at least replace the stays. You might have to do some patchwork on your corset. I had, the reason why I got a new corset is because this one, I had a stay, let's see if I can find it. I had a stay that kept popping out, and it ripped a hole in the top of my dress back here by my shoulder. I said, okay, I've repaired this too many times. This stay does not want to stay. And so I should count how many stays are in here, but I don't know if I can find it. Well, maybe I sewed it back up. But there's stays, and then there's busks. The busk is the thing in the center. This 1890 corset is the most evil of corsets because you had 3 busts. And I got so tired. Oh, here, that one's sticking out. I was cooking on a coal stove in August, okay? Yeah, hot. And I'm like, I can't take it anymore. And I took a knife and I cut it and I pulled out, oh, did it just slide back in? Just slid back in. Can you believe that? Anyway, I pulled it out, got it here, and so then I went from 3 busts, it's like this, to 2. And 2's bad enough, right? 3, solid steel. So if you want to come up here, I mean, I can't even bend it. See? Can't even bend it. That's how hard it is. So, why? Oh, it's good for you. It's good for your posture. It forces you to stand up straight. But boy, if you're cooking on a coal stove, it's not fun. Not fun at all. So here, I found this in a ladies' home journal, and this is from the early teens, 19 teens, and a waist for boys and girls. So you see the term being used in the 1700s, but that term hasn't really gone away. They used it primarily for children's undergarments. And why would you put it on a boy, a girl? To force them to have good posture. So they put them on boys. This one's really interesting because it says, a waist for every age. No wonder she could grow up to wear a corset and feel okay with it. She was trained at, how old do you think she is there? 8? I don't know. So, for posture, and then for, you don't have a brassiere, so this is the only thing for support that you have. Brassiere doesn't exist. That word doesn't exist yet. So, let's go to the next one. Okay, how many of you love the Jane Austen stuff? Yes. Remember my dates. Up until like 1811, these were, and they referred to them as stays at the early part of the 1800s. 1794 to 1800, they're short, the waist. Then it elongates up until about 1810, 11. And the reason why, and this is the whole reason why undergarments change, are to accommodate your outside garment. So Queen Charlotte is a beautiful woman. She is inspired by this artist named Ashton, and he drew a series of paintings called Dawn of the 19th Century. And the women figures in his paintings were like wearing very simple Greek-looking dresses, which is what we see in the Jane Austen films from the early 1800s. The high empire waist. The problem with the high empire waist is that not everybody can wear that and look good in it. You know, you could look a little bit pregnant. Is she pregnant or not? You know, because you have this high waist and it kind of could emphasize your belly. So that's why the stays became very long. Look how long they are. They're down to here. You know what movie I love? The Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth. If you watch that again, watch them when they're outside walking, because you can see when the wind pushes their dress, you can see the edge of their stays. And they really wore the authentic period clothing to make the clothing look so good, like that. So we see the mistress and the servant. The servant doesn't have stays on. She could be pregnant, who knows? So, you know what I mean? That's why it created this nice, long, lean look. And so, but what happened after 1810, in 1811, we start into the Regency era. The Prince Regent held unbelievable balls. And what the mentality throughout history was, the more fabric you're wearing, the more money you have. So this is very simple. And then we start getting into the big gowns that have lots of fabric. So you have more money, and that's when we see this change once the Regency era came up. Okay, where are we? let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we go from waist stays to corset. And we see it changing in the mid-1800s. In the 1860s, you see this nice waist, but the dresses, the skirt starts from here and it's like a bell out. So you don't really have to worry about from here down. You just really need to worry about supporting what's up here and narrowing your waist. But after the 1860s, again, that whole idea with the more fabric you have, when we go into the 1870s, I love that era because the dresses are just overflowing with fabric in the back. Have any of you ever been to Rutherford B. Hayes' home in Ohio? You have? And they have the president's wife's clothes on display. Gorgeous example. You know, it's really not that far of a field trip. You should go there. I forget what town it is in Ohio. It's not that far. And you can see his home, and they have a museum, and you can see the clothes that his wife wore, and it's just, oh my gosh, they're so gorgeous. But the mentality after the war was, during the war, those were lean years. The years right after it were lean years, trying to rebuild. And now it's like, okay, I'm doing good. And then we see the big fabric. And I'm going to show you what we had to wear to hold up that fabric. But, so we have the waist here. Then in the 1870s, the waistline drops. The 1880s, the waistline drops more. The 1890s, you look like a pigeon. You have a very tiny waist, and you are showing that right off like a shelf. And so you have that real long waist, so the corset's going to elongate there. So I need someone with strong hands that can pull, strong arms, to help me put on my corset. Will you help me? You got the strength? There we go. All right. Now there's a whole thing we have to do with putting on the corset. I have to give you a lesson here. So the corset, you see the ties are in the center. When you look at the strings, there's one, and then they always cross, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2 from the bottom on up. So you can start from the bottom or the top. So let's say you start from the bottom. I'm going to hold on to these. Don't do it yet, I'll just show you. You're going to pull, 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 pull. Put your fingers on there. Drop that and pull immediately as fast as you can. Pull, pull, pull. Only drop it when you're ready to pull right away the next line. So you're, yeah, there's a whole method to this. So 1, you're going to pull 1, then 2, 2, 2, all the way up. When you get up to the center, I'm going to pull in the excess. And then you're going to start from the top. Just the 1.
Keep pulling until I can't pull anymore?
Yep. Yeah, and don't think I have to tell her not to think she's hurting me. Because you're going to think you're hurting me, but I can take it. Okay, I have to put the mic down. If you see my face turning red, you know she's doing a good job. Start from the bottom. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, good. Hold on to that as tight as you can, and don't drop it until you pull the next 2, like a ladder, the X's. Drop the bottom one as you pull the top 2 above it. Did you drop the bottom? Okay. So you're always pulling up the excess. Okay. Keep going and pull tight. It's okay. I know, and see how it loosens up if you don't keep it tight? You might have to start again. Yeah. That's why you got to hold on really tight. I need to get skinny. There's a lot to push in. Let's move up a little bit. Okay, here we go. She's good. She's real good. Okay, now watch how I tie this. Cross it. Wrap. Wrap. And tie. Then, whoops. Fluff. And now I'm going to show you a secret. Anybody wear these? This is my secret. I didn't want you to know if I was cold. I had these on under my corset. So we went from corsets to this, ladies. Pedal tops. Anybody wear these? Come on, admit it. It's really hot out in the summer. These are wonderful. They're made out of silicone, so they're reusable. And so you buy them in a package like this. So if you don't want to wear a bra and don't want people to know too much information, or you can buy sticky ones. They're kind of like a Band-Aid. So that's what we've come to, ladies. Corset to that. So yeah, breathing is different. You will probably notice my voice will elevate a bit. And seriously, it takes a little minute. Then you realize you're breathing from more up. You feel like you're breathing from up here, not so much from down here. So it's very shallow, kind of shallow breathing. Why did they do this? Really? I mean, it's unbelievable. But it takes getting used to. I used to wear this all day long, but no doubt about it, I was ready to take it off. And very glad to take it off at the end of the day. And the thing is, when you take it off, it could be wintertime and you have it on, you are a sweat ball underneath there. Guarantee you. If you didn't think you could sweat, you can sweat in one of these. And that's one reason for the chemise. It protects your skin from the corset, and it protects your corset from your skin, because you're not going to wash this as much as your chemise. You have a question?
Where do they wash?
Your chemise you could wash weekly. Your corset, I hardly ever wash it. Like maybe a couple times a year. Yep. Yes. Never say never. I've seen photographs of older women and they're down to here, so there's no way they have a corset on. So never say never. But the mentality back then was, if you're not wearing a corset, it's like going out braless. And you wouldn't do that in public, typically. Most of us, right? There's always an exception of somebody out there. But, and there were corsets that were a little more flexible for housework. This is my 1860s reproduction corset. This one is much, much more comfortable. It's much more flexible. Much more flexible. And of course, it ends just below the waistline. So this one's much more severe because it comes all the way down to here. It goes over my hip bones, this corset. So it's a huge difference wearing this to this. Have you heard of corset covers?
Kim, if there's a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Yeah, I know. I have a feeling men. But, and of course, the French were the leaders of this industry. So, yeah, probably men. But we have to think, women, there's no alternative for support. This is it. So, and your clothes, like when I have my period clothing made to me, you have to have your measurements taken from when you have your corset on. So I can't wear that dress without the corset. My body, it changes your shape. So you have to, if any of you want to get into the period clothing thing, you first have to acquire your undergarments. So be glad, ladies, after today, be glad. But the beautiful lawn dresses they wore just after around 1900, 1910, the white, beautiful, almost see-through. So you didn't want to show your corset, so that's where you'd wear a corset cover. So this one is intended really to be seen, because those lawn dresses were almost see-through. So you had something very pretty that you could look at. So these are just a couple of examples of corset covers. Okay, where are we? Any more questions about the corset? Yes? What is a shirt waist? Shirt waist. I'm not really sure. It might be, they might be talking about the bodice of the dress. Yeah. Well, I know, you could have some of the dresses, a lot of the dresses were made with stays in them, and maybe that's what they're referring to give the shape to it, or does somebody know?
Yeah, they were waist dresses, yeah.
With the,
They were usually buttoned down front, short sleeves, very plain, nature look.
what era are you talking about?
1950s.
1950, that's why I don't know. I only know the old stuff.
Shirtwaist.
Shirtwaist.
I was married in 1962, and my grandmother made me wear her corset. I was 19, weighed 125 pounds. I was 5'9". She laced me up, standing in her bedroom, hanging on to each of the doorknobs from her closet door as she laced me up.
Did you hear that?
She was a doula or a midwife, and she said, a woman always, first priority is to keep her organs in proper shape.
Keep your up here, down there. That's funny. Okay, let's go to the next. Oh, you have something?
What time period did the woman wear the bustle and how did they put that on?
That's our next subject matter. And the overall term for cages, crinoline, bustles, the overall term is dress improver. So these are things that would improve your dress. So let's go to the next one. Let's go all the way back to the Middle Ages. This is a dress improver called a bum roll. I already have my own, thank you. I just love that term. It's basically like a big donut. But you see, she has an underskirt and an overskirt. So it goes over the underskirt, and the overskirt goes over it, so it makes your skirt come out at the sides, makes your waist look smaller, basically, is what that's doing. You see the pomander ball here? She'd have incense in there, some pomander, make it smell good when she walked by. She probably needed it. Can you imagine how much she's sweating underneath all this? Okay, we'll go to the next one. Have you ever heard of false hips? You've seen movies, panniers. That is, you can still go to Greenfield Village and they have them. This was a style, believe it or not, from 1711 to 1775. Some people didn't know any other style. And again, remember what I told you, the more fabric you wear, the more money you have. You need a lot of fabric if you're going to wear one like this. They could be 3.5 feet wide. Actually, I need 2 volunteers right now. Do I have 2 volunteers to try on a couple garments? Come on up here. I need one more. I got one more. All right. I'm going to put a couple dress improvers on you. Okay, this first one, how many of you have ever heard of a farthingale? We're going to put a farthingale on you. This is from the Middle Ages.
Hold that. I'm going to tie it. Okay.
This is called a farthingale. It's kind of like the bum roll that you just saw, where your skirt would go over this and be forced out. They're just like little pillows. And originally, they would have stuffed these pillows with horsehair from the tail and the mane of a horse, because it keeps its shape really well. So, what do you think? It's a little ledge. Put your hand on. Why don't you walk around and show everybody? So that's, again, Middle Ages. Now let's go to panniers. Oh, I forgot I had my dress here. I just threw it. Yeah, just Yeah, just like at home. Okay, let me set this down. Okay, these are panniers from the mid-1700s. I want you to put your hands right in here in these slots. Your skirts would have a slot, so you could put your hand into your panniers and keep your knitting and your money and whatever you wanted to drag around with you. That's your purse. Now, I want you to walk through, come on over here, and I want you to walk between these chairs. How are you going to do it? Guess what?
You can't.
No, you can. Put your hand here. There you go. If she lived in Venice, she might need that. In the little alleyways. There you go. So they are collapsible. Even these big ones, the cage ones, were collapsible by grabbing the end and folding them up if you were going through a doorway. You want to walk around and show everybody? 1711 to 1775. Some people live their whole life not knowing any other style. Isn't that something? What do you think? You going to make it a style? In the 1780s, I'm going to show you something. Would you wear that with a skirt like that? Guess what? That was a style around 1784. That's the original bustle. It was worn in front and back, a little pad, so it would show pregnancy whether it was real or not. Why would they do that? Because their grandmothers or mothers were embarrassed to show pregnancy. They wore something called a jump, which was kind of like an apron that kind of flattened your look. It went over front and back. But yeah, for a very short-lived style, probably for good reason. So let me take that off. Okay, let's see what the next slide is here. Okay, we talked about the bustle making the scene actually in the late 1700s and then going out again. And then it came back in the 1830s. And it's a little roll, and you have different, it was just to slightly lift the top of your dress. So you had this little bit of lift up here. And they were filled with horsehair. I know you're kind of far from me. I have a little horsehair bustle. This is just a little tiny day bustle. This one, they put hooks and eyes on it. So you could clip it onto your petticoat. So you'd have a spot right where it went. And this is the horsehair. You see it? It's white. But it's from the tail and the mane. So they didn't have to kill the horse. So that's okay. They shed that anyway. So that's a little day bustle there. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, you've heard of the hoop, the crinoline. Okay, in the 1850s, The Empress from France, she was another beauty. We see this through history too, where people of royalty pretty much set the stage for design. I mean, when Kate and William got married, everybody's looking at the hats they're wearing, right? You know. So she's the one, Empress Eugenie, she came out with really to introduce this, the crinoline. That one I have a repro of. Let me go and grab it. This is it. Oops, I have it backwards. Could you tell? Can't tell from over there. Okay, so you just step into it and tie it around your waist. And again, this is to hold all the fabric that you're wearing. And in the 1850s, you know, here's Empress Eugenie stepping out in this beautiful style. You know what we didn't cover was the bloomers. I forgot. And why I correlate these two things around the same time is because they happened about the same time, 1850s. Mrs. Bloomer was a woman who went around, she was a suffragette, and she traveled around promoting equal rights for women. And she came up with the Bloomer costume. And what it was the skirt ended about at the calf, and it's basically kind of like the original pantalettes idea, but they were bloomers were a little more baggy, a baggy pant that closed at the ankle. So again, the bloomers were intended to be seen. Bloomers later became a very practical garment to wear for exercise, gym class. And so it kind of held on for a long time, and that term held on for a long time. But that was bloomers. But again, you had to be a very bold person to wear bloomers originally in the 1850s, because you probably, if you were married, your husband would not appreciate that. So it took a strong woman to wear bloomers. And Empress Eugenie, about that same time, came out with this crinoline, and that did it. That set the stage. So this became very, very popular, and you know, we always think of the Civil War era with the crinoline. The problem with this is you need petticoats, lots of them, because if you just put a skirt over this, you'll see the lines. So to soften that look, you needed to put a petticoat over this, sometimes a couple of them. And also to stay warm, if it's winter, you might want to wear a petticoat underneath. And when I say petticoat, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This is just a plain flannel one. It's just a drawstring skirt. See? This one I wear in the winter, because it's flannel. This one I wear with that crinoline, 1860s, when I'm in mourning. Remember what I told you about the sanitary dye? You would not typically wear black undergarments because you sweat, the black would come off on your skin. So even though it's morning and I should be wearing black, I'm typically not going to wear black undergarments, but I could run a black ribbon through my petticoat that I could pull through and take out when I wash it, so it doesn't stain my petticoat. So if a peak of my petticoat should show, it shows that the woe is deep to the core. I have the black ribbon. So basically it's just a skirt. And then they came up with a crinoline that included the fabric in it, as you see here. So it helped eliminate one petticoat. They built it into it. Isn't that ridiculous? It's so huge. It's like, get out of my way. Unbelievable. I don't like wearing that one. It's too big. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. So what happens during the Civil War? There's a lot of women who can't have access to fix their crinolines once they break. Let me show you this one. This one breaks on me all the time. Because what happens is you accidentally step your heel on the inside of it, and then it rips. There's a broken one right there. So you're always repairing these things. They get kind of bent up, and you're trying to reshape them. And so, particularly women in the South, when the North had barricaded a lot of goods from going to the South, the Southern women were hit really hard for supplies. And that's when we see this starting to go away. And then, like I said earlier, after the Civil War, once we started to recover, again, the idea of the more fabric you're wearing, the more money you have, the better off you're showing that you're doing well. So what happens is we go from that bell design to it kind of flattening in the front and pushing back, and that's so you're not stepping on your skirt. And then we see it eventually come up, and we see the return of the bustle. Let me show you a very old and sad looking piece I have. This is basically that piece that you see there, similar. This is to keep the fabric from you stepping on it. This would have had a padded bustle inside of it. It's just, it was in somebody's attic and they neglected it, and it looks very, very sad. That is a small person. Very small person. Also during the Civil War years, let's say you're working a farm. You're not going to be wearing a crinoline. You'd be wearing a corded petticoat. See the cording through it? The cording helps give a little more shape to your dress. So this is what you'd wear every day. So no, you did not wear that every day. You'd wear that when you were going out. This is at home. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here we are. This is from Sears and Roebuck, that slide. And this is the 1880s that you see here. And now, you don't have to make your own petty or your own bustle. You can buy them. Let me grab a couple here on my cord. I'm all tied up here. Maybe I can stretch it. There we go. So, okay, you see a bustle. How are you going to sit down with that thing? Not very easily, but guess what? It collapses. There's a spring on each side, so it collapses. So this is a purchased one. What's interesting is that the person added extra fabric here, probably because it bothered her back. So she put on an extra cushion. And if you read these, like there's stuffed with horsehair to make it a little more comfortable. I like this bustle to show because it's missing the fabric. And this shows you what the guts of a bus, some of the bustles look like. Looks like a slinky. That's the original slinky, ladies. Right there. Isn't that something? Now that really wouldn't be too collapsible. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Let me show you one more thing. Hang on. So you could keep your day bustle just pinned to your petticoat or eye hooked, and that way it's always going to be in the same spot. This is a very simple day bustle, an everyday bustle, unlike these would have been for something a little more nice when you go out. So those are dress improvers. Any question about dress improvers? So let's come down to the tail end of our talk here and the big changes that came. This woman was a French silent film movie actress. She was very well known for her very, very, very tiny, tiny waist. Let's go to the next slide. I kind of have a feeling she had problems later in life and had to wear one of these. Ladies, you have a liver and intestines and a spleen and on, all this stuff in here, right? It's got to go somewhere. And when you're cinching your waist like that, it's usually going to be pushed down. And this is called a pessiary. Some were made out of wood. Some were made out of rubber and steel. Some people wore a special belt, so the tie would be tied to that, and that would be whoosh, pushed up inside of you to hold your organs up. They believe, most people kept those in, these wood ones, kept them in. You wonder about infection. You wonder why so many women died of childbirth, and which basically boiled down a lot of times to infection problems. So, what's happening? Let's go to the next slide. The medical community, and with the help of the suffragettes, Women for Equal Rights, had great access to marketing material at the turn of the century. There were all kinds of women's publications available for you to purchase. They had articles and help, educate you on a lot of issues, including female problems. And you could write in and a doctor could write back and give you suggestions. Doctors were telling women to get rid of the corset. It's making you sick. It's forcing women to have pregnancies with too narrow of a birth canal and babies having to be pulled with forceps and on. Lots of different problems. Dropped uterus was the biggest problem. And so the French corset manufacturing industry was freaking out because they're like, oh my God, this is gonna ruin our industry, our livelihood. So they started coming up, this is a French ad, they started coming up with this whole thing like, oh no, see what your spine would be like without it, and see how straight your spine is with the corset? No, the corset is healthy for you. So, but then, let's go to the next slide. World War I happens, 1914. And what happens? Men are at the front. Women are now working in factories. They're driving vehicles for the first time in history. They're doing men's work. And this doesn't make sense anymore. You just can't do it. So they started coming up with more flexible types of corsets. But then, we'll go to the next slide. They came up with the brassiere. Here we go. These are the roaring 20s, ladies. What happens? The mentality of people was like, well, we don't want to think about the war anymore. We want to have fun. We're going to cut our hair. We're going to smoke cigarettes. And we're going to party. And I want to think like a kid and look like a kid, act like a kid. And that's why we see the 1920s have this little boxy dresses with no shape to them. And the brassiere up on top, you're not showing or flaunting that off. Some women originally were just taking material and wrapping it around to flatten their chest. But now they came up with a brassiere which was intended to flatten you. And the corset kind of came down, and here's your girdle, basically, ladies, is what became the girdle later. So the World War I was the biggest change, not only in how we dressed, but also how we mourned. The display of mourning was a no-no because you didn't want to depress the men coming home from war. And we've never really gone back to the display of mourning that the Victorians had. So that was probably the biggest influence on our lives, even today, on how we dress and certain things that we do. World War I was a huge, huge influence. So I leave it there, but you can think when you look around and see stuff. I showed you one funny thing, the little the pasties. Think about the thongs. Not something I'd wear, but some people do. So anyway, any questions? Yes. Okay, how heavy was the crinoline? The metal thing. Well, I do know with my research that undergarments altogether could weigh up to 30 to 35 pounds. Because there's steel in your corset and your crinoline. Yeah, you don't want to step on the weight scale at the doctor's office with all that on. Yes. Any other questions? Ladies, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed my day here. I'm going to get dressed. You can watch me get dressed while they close up.
Thank you, Kim. Wasn't that great? Aren't we all fortunate to be living today instead of back in the day, as they say? Okay, we're gonna try to move this right along. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and we thank all of you for coming, of course. And a couple of things. We have leftover baked goods in the back, and if you would like to take some of those home, there's a basket there. If you would kindly make a donation and help yourself to those and take some of those delicious goodies home with you, that would be wonderful. I'd also like to thank the Richmond High School Key Club girls that were here today helping us out. And a reminder that our Historic Society raffle this year is an all-expense-paid trip to Mackinac Island, and those tickets are on sale at the back. Marcia Phillips will be really glad to sell a bunch of those today, and it's really a great trip. You get a $150 Visa card along with the all-expense-paid vacation. So be sure to pick those up before you leave. I think we're ready for our auction now. If Gracie, you want to come up and pick tickets? And Lola? At a 1930s hat, Julie Cox. Is Julie still here? Julie, there's a prize for you up here. Come pick something out, please. And before you leave today, I'd like to be sure to get a picture. Our most unusual hat is Kay Bell. Kay? I believe this was an animal hat of sorts. And our most colorful hat, second year in a row, Rose Weeks. I would like to thank Janet Chickmakis and Marilyn Welser for being our judges today. Our next Regs program is in May. It's Michelle McClellan, and she gives an historical account in the value of the Little House on the Prairie. So we hope you can all join us for that, please. Okay, here we go.